Today is November 7th, 2004, and this is the start of an interview at Georgia Highlands. My name is Andy, and I'll be your interviewer. Today's recording is part of the GHC Through Oral History project, and our theme is our stories and experiences. Welcome. Do I have permission to record you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's begin.
Sure.
Uh, what was your first impression of GHC?
That's a great question. It goes back a long time. So I was 13 years old when I first became aware of what was in Floyd Junior College. And the reason that I was so young is because my father was one of the original employees, and so I was aware of the referendum that the community voted to tax themselves to help pay for the school. And I watched it be built. So my first impression was one of great wonder, honestly, that people could do such a thing in their own community. So I was an impressionable young person at the time, and I just thought it was a magnificent experiment in higher education.
Okay, that's good. What unique traditions or events at GHC do you enjoy, or have you enjoyed taking part in?
Sure. Well, so unique, that I'll describe some that are not necessarily unique, but that I do enjoy. And so we do have one thing called a jingle mingle that might be unique, and that's our kind of annual Christmas soiree where every division or every office of the college would bring some cookies or refreshments or something like that, and we all just wander around the campus, go and visit each other's offices and catch up and just have a good holiday experience. So the jingle mingle is always fun. Not unique. This happens every year at most institutions, but it's the annual kickoff. We call it the Charter Kickoff, and so it's our first big meeting of all faculty and staff every year. And now that we have so many campuses and we're so spread far apart, I don't get to see a lot of people except on those days. So I always enjoy catching up with my colleagues at least one day a year at the beginning of classes. And there's a lot of energy present. Everybody's excited to start a new year, so that's always fun. And then I know we're going to talk about this in more detail later on, but I certainly like to think that the Wyoming Study Away program has become a tradition at the college, and obviously I enjoy that very much.
Okay, that's good. Do you feel like you've contributed to GHC?
Yeah, I do, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. There was not a geology program when I started here, so I created it. I kind of talked myself into a job. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not exactly true. I was asked to come teach a summer class in physical science because the physicist had retired, and so someone that I knew who was chair of the science department then called me and asked me if I could fill in for a summer. And that was my first experience teaching. And then I saw the college catalog had geology courses in the catalog, but there was no geologist and there were no geology courses being taught and never had been. So I created the geology program, which I'm very proud of. And at one time we had several full-time tenure-track faculty members in that program, and I'm the only one right now. But we do offer classes on this campus and online, of course. I also developed and taught the first course in environmental science here back in the 1990s or early 1990s, and so I'm proud that course and there was really a lot of time spent in between the development and teaching of that course and what we have now in our bachelor's program in environmental and natural resources. But I'm glad that I have a long history of being involved in environmental science courses.
That's good. Speaking of that, has geology always been a part of your life? Or?
It has. My parents enjoyed spending time outside, and we would take long walks outside. We camped as a family when I was a youngster, and my mom had taken a geology course when she was in college, and she enjoyed it very much. And so she was able to answer a lot of questions that I had when we would go on walks. I'd find rocks or fossils or whatever, and she could explain them to me. So I got bit early and hard on geology and fossils and earth science. So the answer is most definitely yes. I always had an interest.
Do you still continue those traditions with like your family now, or?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I do now. My kids are all grown, but when they were younger and growing up, we were outside all the time. We took long road camping trips and hikes and climbs and all of those things. And some of them still do a lot of that stuff now. Others, I have 4 kids, and they all enjoy spending that time outside. Some of them more than others, but yeah, we pass that along.
And speaking of that, I actually did read that your daughter had a trip. I think it was Australia, right?
South Africa.
Or yeah, South
Yeah.
Africa,
Yeah.
and she did find a new fossil, right?
She did. She was involved in a excavation of a cave in South Africa that, as it turned out, they thought they were going in there for just a few bones. As it turned out, there were thousands of bones of a new species of Homo. So there are about 5 species of Homo. We're one, Homo sapiens, and there's some others, but this was a brand new species of Homo that had never been recognized by science. So that was a pretty fun ride to watch that unfold.
You should be proud.
Yeah. Well, I'm very proud of her. Yeah.
What inspired you to start your career or time at GHC, and why have you decided to stay?
Well, as I mentioned, I was asked to teach a summer school course, and at the time I had just resigned from another job in May, and I got the call to come teach a summer class right after that, and I thought that I had a great experience here. And it was about that time that I saw that the geology courses were in the college catalog, but there was nobody teaching them. So I came directly to the head of the department after that and pitched myself as somebody who'd be willing to develop those courses. And we were just beginning to expand our campus locations at that time. And the college needed some lab sciences to be offered in these remote campuses, as we call them then. So the one in Cartersville obviously was not this campus with all these buildings. It was a little office building downtown right off Tennessee Street that we rented. But to start up a chemistry lab or a biology lab takes a huge investment of money and equipment and facilities. But to teach a geology lab, all you need is a sack of rocks and a few maps. So it was a win-win for everyone. I was able to talk myself into a job, and I would throw my rocks and my maps and whatever else I needed for lab in the trunk of my car and drive to wherever they told me to go teach this class. And it was a good solution for being able to offer a lab science at a remote location at a low cost for the institution. So I did a lot of driving in the early days to our satellite campuses, and I decided to stay because of the students and because of the colleagues. It was just such a warm and uplifting and supportive environment on both sides that I thought, man, this is where I'm supposed to be.
You seem very proud of that. Why do you think kids now should learn about geology?
Oh God, that's a good question. They, especially now with all of the technology that we have available in good ways, but I find that many students don't spend much time outside. And I think that young people, but all people, need to know more about how our planet works. We're reaching such numbers of people. The population is growing so great. We're having such an impact on these natural systems that we need to understand how humans and these natural systems on the planet interact with one another and affect one another, both good and bad. So I think there are very practical reasons for the future of humanity, if I'm being honest. And also, I'm endlessly fascinated about the way the world works, and I like to the best I can, share that with all people. There's so many fun things going on outside in the world.
That's good. Who was your biggest influence growing up, and do you have anyone like that here at GHC as a mentor?
My biggest influence were my parents. I've got to say, when I was a child growing up, they spent a lot of time with us. They included us in so many of their activities and took us to see and do things that were profoundly important and had a lasting effect. As I became older and began to move, out from under their influence, Dr. Philip Greer, who was a professor of biology at Shorter College, became a big influence on me. He was an environmentalist and really introduced me to some of my first knowledge about environmental systems and how interwoven they are and how profoundly they can be affected by certain things over, in one area of an ecosystem always has a impact throughout, or ripple effect throughout the system. So Dr. Philip Greer was a wonderful person and meant a lot to me. In my undergraduate days, when I came to GHC, Dr. David Cook, who is now passed on, Dr. Greer has as well, but Dr. David Cook was one of the original employees of the college, like my dad, and I think we'll talk about him a little bit then more as well. So I knew Dr. Cook as a young man, and then as he was the one that called me and asked me to come teach the summer physical science class. And then he retired shortly after I came to work here, but in those early years, he was definitely a mentor for me, as were many other of the science division faculty members and math faculty members. A lot of those folks had been around for a long time, and I looked to them for guidance and advice as I began my career here. Now, at this point in my career, I'm kind of one of the last guys standing. I think I'm one. There's one other faculty member who's been here longer than I have by a couple of years. So I don't have any mentors per se that I look to for guidance now, but I do get an awful lot of inspiration from my younger colleagues who come in with fresh ideas and enthusiasm, and that is contagious. And so I like to hang around with those colleagues who enjoy being with students and do the kinds of things that I enjoy doing as well. I have served as a mentor for various faculty members for short periods of time in kind of a sanctioned or somewhat official role to help them on board into a D2L course or something like that, just as a guide. So I get a lot of satisfaction out of that too.
Speaking of mentors, what's like the greatest lesson you've learned from one of them?
Cool. I think both Dr. Greer and Dr. Cook taught me a couple of things that have lasted. One is curiosity, to keep an open mind and to ask questions and to never fall into the trap, honestly, of seeing the world in terms of black and white. That there's, with a few exceptions, issues, and particularly in science, rarely are black and white. There's just too many factors. So that was a very important lesson. In terms of my job and what I do with and for students, they both were very patient men, and they were slow to anger. They had good hearts. They were kind, and that was something new to me in the educational world. I think most of us, well, I feel very, very fortunate to have had them as mentors and examples in that way, because many students have a very different experience. They come across a faculty member or a teacher who draws a hard line and it's going to be this way or nothing at all. And I don't agree with that kind of teaching philosophy, and I don't think that we have very many of those faculty members here at Georgia Highlands. So that makes me happy.
Those are some good lessons.
Yeah.
what pushed you to start your Wyoming field courses?
This is a good question. I was going to give you some flowery answer, but I'm going to give you the honest answer first, and that is the first summer that I taught classes at GHC. That was the summer of 1996, probably, maybe 95. I don't remember, but it was a face-to-face class that, because the summer term is shorter, the class meeting times are longer in order to get in all the required time for the class. And it was brutal to be in a classroom for 4, 5, 6 hours a day. It was awful. It was the worst experience I'd ever had teaching. And so I decided there's got to be a better way. And I attended a conference on image processing. At that time, computers and computer image processing was so new that I had to have my computer, which was a large mainframe, shipped all the way to the conference location, and then shipped back home after it was done. Laptops were not a thing. At this conference, I met someone who was from Wyoming, and she was also a geologist. We became friends. We talked. She told me about all the great places in Wyoming there were to visit, and I said, can we hire you as our guide? And I'll bring students out, and you can take us to all of your favorite localities, including the super secret ones, and show us all the good stuff that you know about. And we did that. The first summer, there were 6 students, and then we just increased the numbers after that. So the heart of me starting that program was to get me and my students out of a classroom for 6 hours a day during the summer and to actually go out into the world and do the real thing. So the flowery answer is, we get students in the real world in places that most of them have never been. And Wyoming is literally a textbook in geology. Every single thing that is in that physical geology textbook, we can actually go and visit while we're there, except shorelines. Because there's no ocean there.
Yeah.
But there has been in the past, and we can make that case also. Once I realized the how powerful that experience was, not only for me, but for students, particularly, to get out of Northwest Georgia and to go to these places where everything is so different. Once I realized what a powerful learning experience that was, and never turned back from that.
I'd say that's a great choice you made.
Yeah. I'm working with some numbers right now. I'm doing some writing, and it turns out there've been over 400 students that have gone on that trip. So, yeah, over the years.
Since when?
1997 was the first year.
And you've gone every year since?
Every summer, except 2 years, COVID, 2020 and 2021, we didn't go there.
Yeah. To students who are interested in the Wyoming summer field courses, why should they join, and what should they look forward to?
Well, they should join to expand their knowledge of these earth processes that we're talking about. So anybody that's a hands-on learner and enjoys being outside is going to get something out of the program. So I think experiential learning, hands-on learning is a proven way to enhance learning and give a deeper and richer experience. Now, as to what they should look forward to, they should look forward to a grand adventure and new friendships. Those two things happen every year that we go. Usually we bring together 12 students. In some years we've taken 24 students, but usually those students don't know each other when we start this trip, and we live very closely together. We travel in a 15-passenger van. For years, up until just the last few years, it was a 15-passenger van. We're using a bigger vehicle now, a 15-passenger bus. But can you imagine traveling for 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks in a 15-passenger van with people that you don't know? You get to know them pretty quick, and you're sleeping in the bed with them in a hotel room as well. Yeah, you're sharing double beds or queen beds in a hotel room. And most recently, we're sharing tents together when we're camping for a portion of the trip. So Um, people, we work hard to create a inclusive and respectful environment, clear communication and good communication skills, team building, all that stuff is super important when you're traveling far away from home with a diverse group like this. You want to make sure that things don't go sideways.
Do you have a specific memory or good memory you have?
Of that trip?
Yeah, of the trips
Oh
you've
my
gone through?
gosh, so many of them. I mean, can you imagine after, um, let's see, which one should I tell you about? Yeah, this interview could go from 1 hour to several hours if you get me started down this road. I'll tell you one, or maybe I'll probably tell you more than one, but the first one that comes to mind is 1 year, maybe 7, 8 years ago. I don't know, they all kind of merge. Uh, I got a call from one of the participants, a guy, and he said, "Mr. Morris, are we going to go visit any?" This was before the trip, but he was already accepted, and he was a member of the team, but we hadn't yet met. He called me. He said, "Mr. Morris, are we going to go anywhere that's really pretty while we're out there?" And I said, "Well, yeah, yeah, a whole lot of places." Wow, it's a kind of a strange question. Why do you want to know? And he said, "Well, my fiance has also been accepted into the trip, and I want to propose. Well, I guess it was a girlfriend at the time. I want to propose to her, and I just want to make it special and pick out a really nice place to do this." And I said, "I've got the perfect spot for you." So one of our days, we do a 7-mile hike up to about, it's over 10,000 feet. It's up above tree line in Yellowstone National Park to the top of a mountain. And it's just gorgeous up there. You can see 360 degrees in every direction. And so I told him that's what we were going to do. He tucked the ring into his hat band and hiked up with it. But about 3/4 of the way up, a summer snow squall blew in on us. And it was more than just a snow squall. It was lightning, heavy lightning hitting the ground around us. We all ended up, we were so far away from the vehicle at that time, there was no way to turn around and go back. So standard protocol, and when you're in the mountains, and lightning is a real problem if you're up high because you're on bare rock and there's no trees around. You got metal hiking poles in your hands, right? So we were kind of stretched out on the trail. They were ahead of me. There were some people behind me. All we could do was just drop our hiking poles. You don't want to touch anything metal, and squat down on the balls of your feet so that you're minimizing the amount of your body that's actually touching the ground, hoping that you don't get struck by lightning. Thankfully, it didn't last long, but it just raged on us for about 15 minutes, just hail and snow and wind. And then it blew through, and the skies opened up, and they were the bluest skies you could ever see. And that's what they met when they got to the top of the mountain. By the time I got up there, he was in the process of proposing to her, and of course she said yes, and they went on to get married later that year. So that's a special memory that stands out. Another one more recent, my colleague Brandy Rogers is going to be taking this program over. This summer, 2024, was my last summer running the program. So she has gone with me now for 3 years in a row, and she's going to take it over going forward. But in 2023, we realized that we were going to be in a really nice location, Yellowstone National Park. No, I'm sorry, it was not Yellowstone. It was in Arches National Park in Utah during the full moon. And the skies are very dark out there, and you can see a lot of stars. It's a beautiful desert landscape. So we decided that we would take all of our students out to watch the moonrise, but we didn't tell them what we were going to do. So we drove to a pretty remote location, and when we got there, I thought, I'm going to challenge these students to not say a word. The bus can get pretty loud. Everybody's shouting and yelling, and all, it's all the chaos that you can get in a class full of young people. And I said, but I made this up. I made this part up. I said, "Hey, y'all, Brandy's bus has challenged us not to say a word while we go out here and do a night sit and watch the night sky. And can you do that? And they said, oh yeah, we can do that. So I hopped out of the bus. I went over to Brandy's bus and I said, hey y'all, we're challenging you to not say a word while we go out here and watch nightfall. Can you do that? And they said, oh yeah, we can do that. So 30 people got out of these buses. We went and spread ourselves down on the rock and looked to the east. And we sat there for maybe 30, 45 minutes, and Brandy and I were waiting on the moon to rise. We knew that there was a full moon coming up, and that's why we chose that location with the eastward view. And the moon wasn't coming up. And I went over to Brandy. Nobody had said a word. Brandy, what are we going to do? Nothing's happening. She said, let's just wait a little while longer. So I said, okay, I went back over. And it wasn't much longer after that, and this moon began to come up, and it was so bright, Andy, it looked like a sunrise. And it rose up over a mountain range that was in the background, and there were these thin little clouds. But it was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. And while it happened, nobody said a single word. We all just sat there in absolute silence for about an hour and a half. And that was a pretty special moment. Things like that don't happen very often. It was really unplanned. We didn't understand the magic that would happen from that. Yeah. After the moon got completely up, the ground was lit so bright nobody needed a flashlight or anything. But one by one, we began to stand up and stretch, and we all walked back to the van again. Nobody saying anything. And it was a quiet ride home. Some people did chat a little bit, but it was a pretty powerful experience to sit out in the desert, not say a word, and watch something like that happen. A lot of people had never seen the moon rise before, so it was cool.
That's great. When was this?
That was 2023. That was the summer of 2023. We did the same thing in 24. This summer, we found out what the date of the full moon was and where we were going to be on that day, and we went to a good place with a nice view. And it was also powerful. There was a lot of movement this time. People were moving around and shining some lights, and it was quiet, but it was not quite as good as it was the first time.
Not special.
You're right.
Yeah. All right. To all the students studying geology, what is one piece of advice you would give them to succeed in that line of study?
Well, I can't just give one. So I'll tell you what I tell the students that come to my class. First of all, read the book, read the information.
Yeah.
That's pretty standard for any class, right? But secondly, get outside and try to find things that you're seeing in the book and relate your own world to them. And when you can make those kind of connections, then I think that's where learning happens.
Those are some good ones. Yeah. I know you've taught geology courses, but what are some other courses you've taught at GHC?
I had to make a list of these so I would be sure to remember. So that first one I ever taught here was a physical science course. And I am not a physicist, but thankfully the physical science course, I could teach that. So that was fun. That got me in the door. After that, it's been physical geology, which is a study of rocks, minerals, and processes like volcanism and earthquakes and things like that. And then historical geology, which is the study of the evolution, both the physical and the biological evolution of Earth from the beginning to present. So it's a long view of geologic time. Environmental science. I mentioned that I developed that environmental science course back in the 90s. That was a lot of fun too. And then most recently, now that we have our new majors program in environmental science and natural resources, I've taught a course in soils. And currently I'm working on, I'm developing a course, and we'll teach in the spring a course on hydrology, which is, of course, surface water and groundwater and how it moves on the planet.
That's good. What made you want to start the, I'm going to pronounce it like ENVR?
EVNR, yeah, Environmental and Natural Resources bachelor's program. So I have to back up a little bit. I didn't start that program. That was conceived of and written by our current provost, Dr. Sarah Coakley, and my dean, Jason Christian. So they came up with the idea and actually wrote up the course proposal list, and I had some input on what courses would be appropriate for that bachelor's degree, but I didn't start it per se. I'm involved in it now. I've always had uh, an interest in environmental issues, whether it's pollution or air, water, soil pollution, and all those things, recycling, all the things that go along with environmental science concerns. So I was just incredibly happy when that was our latest 4-year degree program. It was something in STEM and has a lot of courses that I feel strongly about and am qualified to teach. So it's a great time in my career to kind of teach more than just Geology 1 and Geology 2. Don't get me wrong, I love those courses, but to be able to teach some 3,000 and 4,000 level courses is wonderful.
How long did it take to start up the program?
Well, it's quite a process to introduce a new bachelor's program to an institution. So it takes, I think, they were probably on a 3 or 4 year timeline. So the curriculum has to be written up, all kinds of paperwork, and it's got to go before the university system of Georgia for approval. We have to approve all the things in-house. So there's a whole lot of hoops to go through, a lot of red tape and paperwork and approvals before you can actually say, okay, now we have a new bachelor's program to offer students. So we just began teaching courses in the program last academic year. That was the first rollout of courses in that program, and we still have courses that have not been taught yet. For example, this hydrology course that I'm working on now. But we graduated 2 people. Our first 2 graduates graduated in May of this year, and I think we'll have another 6 or so who will graduate in May of 2025. And I believe there are around 75 declared majors in the program right now. Yeah, it's taken off.
Did your father having a role at a GHC influence you to start teaching at GHC?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And he was not a faculty member. He was staff. He was director of auxiliary services, which at that time was the bookstore in the cafeteria. Mm-hmm. So he ran those 2 operations, and they were run in-house. Now that's very different than the way we do it now. Those programs are contracted out to third parties. But at that time, when Floyd Junior College began, they were run by the college itself. So he was in charge of those 2 things. But yeah, to have him involved in that, and my mom was a college professor. He was not. He never taught, but he got a great deal of satisfaction out of being involved with students and feeling like he was a part of their journey, their academic journey, and he spoke about that a lot. And so between the 2 of them, I had role models for higher education and the impact that it could have on students. So yeah, there was definitely an influence from my father in coming to Georgia Highlands. Now, there was a long time in between when I was 13 years old and when I actually began work here, but he had long since left employment with the college. But yeah, he definitely had an influence.
What did you said your mother was a professor? What did she teach?
She taught communications. She taught communications at Shorter University, was Shorter College then, for 40 years. She was a college professor for 40 years. So I watched her interact with students in a very meaningful way. We often had her students in our home for get-togethers, for meals, for holiday celebrations, for whatever. She was very involved with students both in and out of the classroom.
Did she also inspire you to start teaching?
Oh yeah, for sure. And she's still alive. She's 90 years old and very active. And we have always had long conversations about our shared experiences as educators. What works, and kind of the inside baseball kind of talk that colleagues would have, although we were never colleagues per se. Well, that's not true. I did teach briefly at Shorter College, part-time, and so I guess we were colleagues at the same institution for a short amount of time. And I can elaborate on that a little bit more too. I saw another question. Maybe this is a time to bring it in relation to her influence on me. She developed at Shorter College. She developed a program whereby inmates could earn their college degree. And what that involved was faculty members going into the correctional facilities and teaching classes in prisons. And she called me up one day and she said, "Would you like to teach geology up there at Hayes Correctional Institute in Somerville and Tryon?" I said, "Well, yeah, sure, I'll do that." And so for probably 2 or 3 years, I would travel up there for night classes and teach to inmates in a room that they had designated for us. When I took my rocks and minerals and lab supplies in there, I had to inventory every single thing before I went in. The lab notebooks were spiral bound notebooks with a wire spiral. They wouldn't allow those in. They had to cut the wire out. Only papers coming in these rooms. And the inmates were so well behaved, they recognized that it was a privilege. They had to earn the privilege to participate in the program. So, and they had so many life experiences. So many of them had done so many things in so many places, and it was one of the best teaching experiences I ever had, honestly. And it was all because my mom started that program, and she actually had a few people to finish and earn their degrees while they were in that program. Some federal changes to financial aid disallowed their participation in that, and so the program ended. But for a while, it was quite successful. So yeah, I was heavily influenced by both of my parents from not only at a young age, but even now, I still talk to my mom and get advice from her about how to navigate higher ed.
That's good.
Yeah.
When was this? What do you say? How do you say it? Prison
college?
Yeah, prison college.
That would have been in the mid 80s. Yeah, that would have been mid to late 80s, 1980s.
But it was short-lived?
It was short-lived, yeah.
Okay. Well, over the past 30 years of teaching, has there been a major change in the way you teach students or just teaching in general?
Oh my. Something I still do the same. The traditional classroom lecture with, we used to, most of it involves technology changes, to be honest. When I first started teaching, we used mimeograph machines. Probably never seen one of those.
Nope.
It uses fluid, and you have to hand crank this thing, and it generates pieces of paper with blue writing on them. Smells to high heaven, a real mess. But technology changes. But in the ways that I actually meaningfully interact with students, some of those things are still the same. So I still do a more or less traditional lecture. But in the past, when I first started, things like think, pair, share, and interactive activities, collaborative activities during class were not recognized as best practices then. Kind of the way we did things then was just to stand at the front of the room and lecture. Yeah, just lecture. Take notes. I'm going to tell you what to think. Fortunately, in my college experience, I had professors that didn't necessarily do it that way. So I had some models to look at and to try to emulate. So what I try to do more of now is a little bit less lecturing, but more interactive experiences during the lecture time. So lecture for a little while. Now we're going to work through this activity. It's going to help you understand what we just talked about. Or in many of my courses on the Floyd campus, I can go right outside down to the wetlands where we've got streams, and of course we've got the lake there, and we can do things outside. We can build maps. So I try to build in more experiential learning opportunities and activity-based projects during my lectures. Other than that, as I said, it's mostly technological and mostly innovative through tech. We in 1997, I think, or thereabouts, we had at Floyd College then what we call the laptop project. where every student was issued a laptop computer, and these were big IBM ThinkPad brick-like computers, and every faculty member was given one too. And Clayton State University partnered in us with this project. So we were the first institutions in the state, and one of the first institutions in the country, to be honest, to say, here's this machine, now it's gonna help you learn better. But we didn't know how to use it. We didn't know how it was gonna help us learn better. But it was a very exciting time to be at the cutting edge of technology. So we got a jump start on online. We weren't doing too much online teaching then. There was no such thing as a learning management system like D2L or Canvas, or those did not exist. If you wanted to have, and the World Wide Web was hardly a thing. We had a couple of servers on campus that we could, HTML, we had to learn to do a little bit of coding, and then some GUI interfaces came along pretty shortly after that, so you didn't have to know how to code. But I was the first, my geology course was the first lab science course to go fully online, and I'm proud that we're still doing that. But all of that was because of the laptop project was brought to us by our then president, Dr. Lynn Condiff. He was the driving force behind that, and he convinced the USG to give us enough money to buy laptops for all of our students. So those were really exciting times back then. And obviously since then, so much has changed with all the resources that we can find, particularly for earth science. And earth science and geology is such a visual science that it's really well suited for maps and things like Google Earth and all the other imagery that's available to us now. So we do things differently now.
I didn't know we got laptops like that early.
That was early. Yeah, it was early. We could dial in using a modem. So these IBM ThinkPads had a little spring-loaded modem that would pop out, and you just take a phone cord and plug it in there, and then you could actually dial into the server on campus. That's how Wi-Fi wasn't a thing. There was no such thing as Wi-Fi at home. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. So basically, better technology, more hands-on.
Yep. More hands-on, and make use of the technology to enhance and solve problems and see things that we could never see otherwise.
Sounds like you did a good job on just building the course in general. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
Let's see. Look over my notes here. I think I tried to make just a few notes over your questions, so I keep me on my talking points. I guess I would like to say that I have been so supported by my leadership here throughout the time I've been here, from the very first summer course that I ever taught through every other thing that I have asked to do. I don't think I've ever been told, no, we don't want you to do that. In fact, quite the opposite. As I brought ideas about doing things differently or going to Wyoming or other field trips, I've always been supported and lifted up and felt like my leadership. By leadership, I'm talking about my chairs and deans and vice presidents, or provosts as we call them now, even right on up to the president. And I'm so grateful for that. I know that that's not the experience for a lot of my colleagues at other institutions, and maybe not even at GHC, but I think it is by and large the experience of most faculty at GHC is that the leadership will always have our back as long as we're doing the right thing by students. And that's hugely important in keeping faculty members here. I think it's important for faculty to have longevity at an institution so that there's some institutional memory that can be passed from one generation of faculty to another, and so that students and even children of students that after 30 years, you can imagine that occasionally a student shows up and says, well, you had my mom or my dad back in the day. And that's a couple of things there. Number one, it makes me feel pretty old. But another thing, it makes me feel pretty good that that their mom or their dad would say, yeah, you might enjoy this course that Morris teaches. So Georgia Highlands College has got an amazing future ahead of it, and I'm just proud to be a part of helping that move forward.
That's great. Sounds like your ideas were always supported, which was a good thing because I've heard a lot of good things about your Wyoming trip. So,
Well, thank you for saying that. It has been a great experience, I think, for everybody involved. We've had a few hiccups here and there, but overall, it's been a wonderful ride.
that's good. Well, this concludes our interview today. Mr. Morris, thank you for joining me and taking time to share your experience at GHC with me. Yeah.
Of course, Andy. Thank you for your questions. There were some really good questions, and you seem like a fine young man, and I wish you luck going forward.
Thank you.